Welcome, friends. We are excited to tell you a little bit about our trip to Uganda and about our pilgrimage to the Glen Burnie Primary School. So Steve Young was right here, can raise his hand because not everybody necessarily knows him. And Angela, Eli, Lucy, and myself went there late June through the middle of July. And we figure not everybody knows where Uganda is. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. All right. So it's right on the equator. It's this country that's right here, and we put a little dot for the Glen Burnie Primary School located in Mityana. And we'll zoom in for a second and show you a little closer in Uganda where it is. So Uganda is next to Kenya, South Sudan, which I think perhaps Trinity is a little more aware of, right? Sudan. And then we've got Rwanda, which we know a little bit more about. And this country right here is the Democratic Republic of Congo, which sends so many of the asylum seekers here to the Portland area, and similarly sends so many asylum seekers to Uganda, because Uganda has an incredibly open border policy with all of these countries around. So Steve, I'll start going because I know you were going to tell just a little bit as we started going. After we arrived in Entebbe, we worked our way from the airport to the school. You were going to tell them.
I think when you go...
Can you stand, because we're recording this.
Yeah. Right. So we got a wonderful welcome here. Just another piece of this, why we went here. Elizabeth and I went to this place 7 years ago, and we spent 2.5 months there. And got to meet, keep going with the slides here. This is how they greeted us. All the children are saying, "Welcome visitors, and we're so happy you're here." But this woman, Maama Victoria, is an incredibly inspiring saint. She started this school thinking, okay, well, I'll start a boarding school. And kids got dropped off. Maybe sometimes with the first term's payment. Often it would be a grandmother who was taking care of a dozen kids. Parents died of AIDS or something else. And she just took more and more kids in and more kids in. So now she has 150 kids there. About 30 or so of them are actually supported by tuition, and the others not. So keep on going here. We asked her, how do you make it all work?
We're not going to keep going.
Okay, how do you make it all work? And she says, well, we have enough money for this month. God will provide for next month. It's like, how do you live like that? Anyway, that's it.
So pretty quickly from getting there, we basically were immersed in the life of the children in the school. You want to talk about being taken down to the playing field? Yeah. Lucy loved this.
The first day we got there, around 3 p.m., we went down to the field that they have with their soccer balls and frisbees. While some of the boys played soccer, I was so overwhelmed by all the kids running around and jumping on me. I felt like no one understood how I felt. Every day I was forced to go out to the field and help out because there were not enough people. It was really hard and I didn't know how to handle it. Another thing was knowing how to act. It was like a whole different world there, and poverty was crazy and really hard to handle along with the language barrier. The culture was extremely different than what I'd ever experienced before. I had to remind myself a lot that we were across the ocean in a different continent.
And it took a long time to get that hair tangle out, didn't it?
5 minutes to upgrade it.
And what she's talking about is real. Most of the kids there did have shoes. Steve, when you and Elizabeth went there,
Maybe a third of the kids had shoes. Now they have these plastic Crocs that don't have good traction. Well, almost all the kids have shoes.
But you always just see piles of shoes outside because you never bring the shoes inside because, of course, that would track in the dirt. Why am I showing you a boy chopping wood? Well, that is right outside of the kitchen. That's the kitchen for 150 kids. And what he's doing is he's getting the wood ready for the kitchen. Because that's what your kitchen is. Because your only fuel is wood. Wood cleared from the forest or wood purchased at the marketplace. So imagine doing your cooking for 3 meals a day in that. We're going to just take you on a quick tour of the school. This is kind of their root cellar. This is how they store things. We call that, those aren't potatoes, that's called Irish. That's what we call potatoes over there, Irish. You definitely get a lot of fruit. But the main thing that you'll eat when you're there is if you're a child, is ground up corn. Just corn flour with some water, maybe a little bit of milk because they have some cows, and then some beans mixed in. And it's called?
Hosho. And
Hosho.
we have 3 beans.
And so you have basically that for breakfast. You have it as a porridge. You have it for lunch where it's thicker like a loaf, and you have it for dinner. That is your meal every day, every day, every day.
Except when you're lucky and you get the leftovers that we
From the visitors. Which is a really big deal. And how did we like the food? How did my kids like the
It was
food?
so bad.
And for them it was so wonderful. Yep. They collect tons of rainwater because while there is some water that's provided by the township, it's expensive. And when you're living on a shoestring and we have enough for this month, but we don't know how it'll be provided next month, you're not going to use money to pay for water, right? So this is the other way you get your water. You send 7-year-olds and 6-year-olds with 10 to 15 liter buckets. And you have them walk 3 kilometers, 5 times a day, down this path to what they call the well. This is a steep hill. You're coming to the well now, which is really just a dirty stream that collects all kinds of waste from animals. And they fill those things in there, and that's what you're going to use to water the plants, right? You're going to use it to wash the clothing. You're going to use it to water the animals. And you might use it in other things. You're not using it for drinking. We know that.
Or cooking.
Or cooking. You're going to use the better water for that. But for all other purposes, because you're not going to pay the city, this is what you're doing. And so it's girls like that, and it's almost always girls, are carrying this water 3 kilometers, 5 times a day on their heads. And I kind of made it my own personal thing where I would do this trip 3 to 4 times a day, and I'd scoop up the water and take it from kids. Because it was so hard to watch them carry those heavy water bowls. Anybody want to say what this is? Because you were going to talk about this, Steve.
Yeah. When Elizabeth and I went there before, a room this size would have 30 beds for kids. We get just a tiny little bit of support. And Maama Victoria and her husband Stephen have, as a result of that, built another dormitory. And not just from us, but some, I don't know where they get it. And so now they're down to, this is a spacious dormitory. There's only 17 or 18 kids in the dorms. And she hopes to build a couple more dormitories so the kids can have more room.
That is the personal belongings of how many kids, Lucy? 2 kids share that.
2 or 3, so it depends on how much stuff they have.
So just to give you a sense.
And 2 kids per mattress. So this 3-level bunk bed would sleep 6 kids because there's 2 on each mattress.
Well, anywhere from age 3 up to age about 14. Okay? So this is primary school before you would go to what, like on the English model, secondary school. Right? And one of the reasons she takes children in is because they don't have any safe place to sleep. This is a safe place to sleep. You've got
Yeah, we were kind of surprised when we were talking to her, and she was saying that there's this one child in particular that she just had recently taken on, and she said because in their house they didn't have a bed. And we're looking at this and thinking like, oh my goodness, this is like terrible living conditions. And for them, like, this is a lot better than some of the situations that they're living in their families.
This is what we got. It was palatial comparatively. So Angela and I shared this. Lucy got that. We have mosquito netting, right? We had a light bulb. We had some shelving for all of our stuff. We got our own toilet. We got a drippy sink. And what you can't see is we even got a shower that dripped really cold water.
It was a steady flow of water.
It was a steady flow of drippy cold water. Yeah? And you could you could get yourself clean. You really could get yourself clean. And I'm not kidding, the word palatial comparatively is the right word, even though for us, it's roughing it, right? This is not fancy. And yet by Mityana standards, when people would come to visit like the huge Anglican cathedral that's there, this is where they would send Europeans to stay because this is the nice guest house. This broom tells a story. First off, it looks totally different than our brooms, right? But the other story is you never saw a boy ever using these brooms, right? You always saw girls using these brooms. And you always saw the girls on their knees using brooms. And whenever the girls were going to come talk to you, or the boys come talk to you, this is what they would do to talk to you, right? They would kneel in front of adults to talk to you. Which I will just say personally was really hard, to have little black children come and kneel to talk to me, and have them clean the floor with those brooms, and clean where I was staying. Just, especially given like all the history of colonialism and everything else, you're hitting that right in the face and seeing it there. And that's something that Lucy, I know that was really hard for you too, right? Is that fair for me to say that? There's some of the wood that they constantly are using, and you're watching these kids carrying the wood all the time just to cook. Want to talk about the classrooms?
So these are the classrooms. I teach kindergarten in Gray, which is one of the less well-funded school districts in the Portland area. And in my kindergarten classroom, I probably have at least 300, probably 500 books. So as we were getting ready to go here, and I was hearing that they don't have any books. It just blows my mind to think about how you teach kids how to read without any books. So what they do is they have posters up on the wall that they use to teach from. And so it's amazing the ways that they're so resourceful. It's amazing the ways that they find to be able to teach and to meet kids' needs. So English is not their first language. The first language is Uganda. But English is very much the language of business and education. So if you're going to be successful in Uganda, you really need to speak English. And so the school works really hard to help all the kids to learn English. And so they had the English alphabet up, and they were teaching the kids the different letter sounds. In my school district recently, we've done a whole lot of professional education recently about phonics. And so I was glad to be able to share some of that information with them. One of the things that I noticed when I was looking at their sounds, which stood out to me as somebody who teaches letters and letter sounds, is with the letter S, that these are the words that they taught that start with the letter S. And what stood out to me is that one of those words is short, which is not made with the same sound as just the letter S. The short is made with the SH sound together. And so I was kind of talking to them and explaining to them that some sounds in English are made with one letter and some sounds in English are made with two letters. And I was able to share with them a resource from my school district, this is the sound card that represents the 42 different phonemes, the 42 different sounds that make up the English language. This is how I teach it in kindergarten. And so each one has like a picture and a little sound and emotion that goes with it. And so they were really interested, and it was fun to share that with them. And they are so committed to teaching these children, and they are so open and wanting to do the best that they can with the little resources that they have. So I was really glad to be able to share some of that with them.
And these teachers make a pittance. And I don't mean by US standards, I mean by Uganda standards. Okay? So by US standards, of course, they make a pittance, right? This is a developing nation. They make about 140 ideally per month. Ideally, Maama Victoria would like them to make closer to 190 a month. But when you have just enough for this month, and who knows about next month, it's hard to hit your target, right? That's not enough to pay for food. So they have to find other side gigs to be able to pay for their food. Just to give you an idea. To survive, and food has more than doubled in cost in Uganda. We complain about it here. It truly has more than doubled there. So I mean, these teachers are committed, and they're living on next to nothing.
One of the things that was very, very different is one of the teachers in the back of the classroom had a towel down with her infant on it. And so, there's no daycare available, there's no childcare. And so this teacher, while she's teaching a class of 25 kids, also has her 9-month-old baby in the back of the room to take care of, which also is kind of passed around between the kids. They all just work to take care of each other. It very much is it takes a village kind of a culture where everybody works together to try to take care of each other. So especially the older girls are taking care of the younger kids, and they're all working together to make everything work.
There you can see morning tea. So this is basic, it's just ground up corn flour, some water, a little bit of milk, and a few beans.
And I got a piece of bread this year too.
Yeah, you got some bread this time. That was a good day. It's a good day.
Didn't somebody offer you some of this bread?
Oh yeah, every time they would have food, they would offer you the food. Now, one thing I want to really emphasize, so Stephen was saying it costs about $150 a week to feed the children. That's just what it costs in terms of buying the corn, just the corn flour. And it used to cost $75 about a year and a half ago. Now it's about $150. Just to give you an idea of the impact. A lot of that has to do with Ukraine. You don't see many people who look emaciated in Uganda, despite the incredible poverty. I've been to Haiti, which is probably comparative with severe, severe poverty. Part of it is like you're in a completely equatorial region with incredibly fertile soil that hasn't been denuded of the topsoil, and things just grow. So you find like jackfruit growing everywhere. Anybody seen jackfruit before? It's huge! The stuff is huge, and it's just growing in the trees, and now you're going to see how big it really is.
Wow.
Yeah, the stuff is huge, right? So the kids get hungry, you want something? Great, you go out and get a jackfruit. That'll feed like 40 kids.
Oh, wow.
And it'll give you a nice hit of glucose, so you're all set, right?
It's really sweet, and if you eat like a big bite, it's really sweet, and I had to spit it out because it was too sweet. Yeah.
It makes gummy bears taste like not very sweet.
Sour.
And I have this slide in here both to show you the jackfruit, but also to show you my friend David. David is from Rwanda. David is one of the orphans at the school. And David came with me one day to help tend the crops that the kids take care of on the grounds. David had his family, his mother and he, and had been in a terrible fire that destroyed their home. They left the home. And they had come to Mityana because Mityana has it's a better like just physical location. It's constantly temperate, constantly comfortable, and you can grow anything there. So you're not gonna, you're not gonna starve, basically. If you can find a plot of land, you're not gonna starve. And so David and his mom lived there, and he got taken in by Maama Victoria's school, and then COVID killed his mom. And part of that fire, I don't know if you can see, like he's struggling to hold that jackfruit, whereas this guy, he's got no problem. In that fire, he had shattered his leg, and he was in the hospital for about 8 months. So he always walks with a constant limp. He will never be physically strong. He will always kind of suffer with pain. His English is very broken. He struggles. That's his teacher on the side there. And he struggles. But Maama Victoria basically said, like, he's got no mom, he's got no family. We're going to take this kid in. And so, as he was telling me the story of the death of his mother and the burning down of his house and, his broken leg, I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to, sponsor this kid. It was one of those kind of things like that. So, there you can see us attending. This is working in the gardens. I will tell you that the teachers' gardens look a heck of a lot nicer than the kids' gardens. but part of what they're doing is they're learning how to do this agricultural work, because this is part of how you are going to supplement your own personal life. Is knowing how do you raise corn. This is coffee. They're growing cassava. They're growing plantains. They've got yucca. They've got all kinds of things that just grow with very little work. And I mean, it's just a basic hoe, and you're just chopping. And I watched them take the head off a snake. That was pretty exciting.
I wouldn't say very little work. These kids work hard.
They work hard. But the soil is not compacted because they've worked with it so much. There's Lucy and Eli's favorite food, plantain, which gets turned into matoke. Yeah, which is mashed plantains.
With pepper and weird seasonings.
Yeah. So when you don't grow everything, you go to the market. And this is the market, which is maybe, what do you think, Steve, a 10-minute drive from the school down a rutted one-lane road. It's magnificent. It's absolutely magnificent. You can get most anything there. There you can see the grains. There you can see how you transport your plantains. And that is how we constantly got welcome to classrooms. This rote welcome. They often tell us the school's motto, Bible verses. You always talk as a unit. You almost never speak as an individual.
I heard it so many times that I memorized it by accident.
You are welcome, dear visitors. Our school's motto is love and work. Yeah.
My teacher is, our school motto is
Love
and work.
Love and work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we spent a lot of days going into the classrooms, doing Bible stories. Should we show the video?
Yeah, until I score.
Let's go to the other side of the lake.
Keep in mind, English is not their first language. This is very hard for them to understand.
Wanting to find a quiet place to rest. He and his disciples got into a boat, and they started to sail. Bright sunlight sparkled on the water. Gentle waves rocked Jesus to sleep. Snore, Jesus.
So most every day we'd act out some story, we'd have questions and answers with the kids, and it was a lot of fun.
Most of it was questions.
That's true. You'd have to get the teachers to ask, and then the kids would answer. We would do lots of crafts. You want to say anything about what it was like to do crafts?
They just had so little experience with any kind of school supplies. They have pencils and very limited amount of paper. But almost all of their learning is just sort of memorizing these words, so the teacher will sort of chant out information and the kids will repeat it back because they have almost nothing. So we brought watercolor paints, which they were amazed by. It was so much fun. They were just delighted to have the opportunity to use colored pencils and to paint with watercolors. It was really fun to watch them. So we brought a bunch of paper, we brought watercolors, and we brought them into the classroom and we read the creation story, and then we had them paint some kind of representation of something in God's creation. And they were just so into it. And then the other thing we did was we read the story of Jesus and let the little children come to me. And I had each child make their own paper doll. And so I gave them like a stencil of a paper doll for them to trace and cut out and then to color with colored pencils. And they were just so excited to have these very basic kind of supplies and activities.
We went through 2 reams of paper in a week with these
They were
kids.
just so excited.
All right.
Pause that for just a minute. So each night, the kids would gather and they would sing songs of thanksgiving and joy. And put up. They drummed on a plastic puppet. And it's just inspiring to hear them. They do this for close to an hour. Go to the next slide there. So Lucy and Eli contributed some of their money to purchase 2 drums made out of cow skin in the local village. And the kids were just amazed, like, you go from a 5-gallon bucket to these cool, real African drums.
With
They couldn't
resonators
believe it.
inside them, that make the buzzing noise and everything.
And I think the 2 drums cost like $75,
Yep.
made by a local guy in the village. And you would have thought they were just, the heavens had opened for these guys.
And Maama Victoria grooved to them too, which was kind of fun.
Isn't that Maama Victoria and her husband?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Steve.
yeah, he's drumming and she's dancing.
Cool.
You all had donated supplies and support. So like, for instance, Edith, the clothing was given to Maama Victoria that, so lots of different things. Maisie had given us clothing to take down.
Those dresses.
The dresses were taken down. We took down lots of different things. And this was when we were giving all the different pieces of like items to them. Because there's no way to ship stuff to Uganda. Susan looked into shipping a box, and it was like $600, $700, $800 through FedEx to get to Entebbe, which is 2.5 hours away from here.
It was I wanted to send a box of watercolors. This much watercolors.
Yeah.
$1,000.
Yeah, it's just, you can't do it. You can't do it.
These are the girls who adopted me. They were just so sweet and so loving, and it was heartbreaking that they just kept asking me to take them home with me. They kept saying, "Please take us home to your country." They said, "You are my mother." To me, it just totally broke my heart.
And they wanted to leave Lucy.
He said, "Why don't you leave and take us home?"
I must have said that 30 or 35 times.
The story about when Jesus comes again.
Yeah, one of them said to me, "When Jesus comes back at the end of the world, you will be Uganda and I will be English."
And I will come to your village.
Yeah, another girl said, "When I get older, I will come to the United States and I will ask your neighbor, where does Angela live? And I will come and find you."
So both of the kids would spend time just interacting with the other kids. Eli took some time reading some of the Bible stories. He loves this video. And he loves that I added some animal noises.
One of the things that we were excited to be able to share with them was these children's Bibles, which are written by Desmond Tutu. And so we brought with us these 10 children's Bibles to give to each classroom in the school. And we were really excited to be able to share that with them because they have no books. And so to have these books, especially written by an African author, and Desmond Tutu did a beautiful job telling some of the Bible stories.
Yeah.
The day that we gave the book to one of the teachers, she was just overjoyed to be able to have this book that she could read stories to the children in her classroom.
Yeah, they spent hours just wanting these stories read over and over again. Lucia also took time teaching different just hand games. So here was another day, which is where Eli went on a football match and was invited to play football, which we call soccer. We're getting near the end of this now. So part of what was interesting is for the school to go and play, they had to go 5 kilometers. How would we do that here if you were going to go play against 3 other schools?
Take a bus.
You'd take a bus. Here you walked 5 kilometers on foot. And when we play sports here, what do we make sure we have plenty of for kids?
Water.
There was no water and there was no food. And we were there for 6 hours.
That's crazy.
Wow. And now I want you to know, it's like 78. It's not scorching hot. It's like perfect temperature there. It's perfect. But at the same time, they're playing sports. They've just gone 5 kilometers. This is the road. You can't tell. It's uphill almost the whole way. No water. Were you thirsty? I was thirsty. You were pink, buddy. You were pink from the sun, which is why that kid was like, "Are you allergic to the sun?" Right? You know? And so we went and
no sun in the U.S.
And part of what was incredible, this is the Glen Burnie team. And what you can't tell right there is they're all wearing cleats. The 3 other schools that we're playing against are all barefoot. Now we've told you a little bit about this place. And here's the crazy thing. This is like Glen Burnie when it comes to like sports, because Maama Victoria's son is really into sports and he has connections with other people who play soccer, he's able to get passed down football gear, which he gives to this school. So when they play, they look like they're the Exeter, or the Phillips Exeter of the local schools. And the other schools, I mean, really, it's much more threadbare. They're all barefoot. They look like the unequipped teams, which is really bizarre. Because you know they're using privies. Yeah, they got a little water, but they're using privies. You saw what they're sleeping with. It just gives you this idea of levels of need.
When Elizabeth and I were there 7 years ago, I have a picture of them playing soccer with a tied together ball of rags. So over time, they're moving up in the world.
Yeah. Let me get through the goal, and then Eli, you can tell a little bit of your story, and we'll help with that. It was pretty amazing when we were here, though, because we'd spent all of our time at Glen Burnie, so the kids had gotten used to us. But these other schools, Eli, how many of them had seen folks with skin like this? 0. So we heard a lot of people pointing at us, talking about us, and calling us the word there. It's Mazingo, which means stupid white guy.
But in an inappropriate way.
And it's not a friendly word. So it was
I didn't hear that.
That's awesome. I love you. That's what we do when we score a goal. Looks just like here, right? No different.
What about football?
Yeah? So Lucy wants you to know, and she's absolutely right, that as the boys were playing football, the girls play a different sport, which is called hoop ball. which is an odd kind of combination of basketball and ultimate frisbee. Because when you have the ball, you cannot take a step. Kind of like an ultimate frisbee. When you have the frisbee, you can't take a step. And when you shoot, you have to pick your foot up and shoot with just one hand.
You don't have to pick your foot up, but you have to
You
shoot
get more
with-
points if you pick your foot up. It's very interesting. All right, so Eli, do you want to tell a little bit about Enoch, your friend Enoch, and about soccer?
This is you. You were gonna help me.
Yeah, I'm going to help you. And why was Enoch helpful for you?
Because I felt like I couldn't play football. Sometimes I couldn't.
When was the last time you played football?
Oh yeah, when I was in preschool. You were 4. Yeah. And he was just really helpful because he was very encouraging. And
When you'd run up to kick the ball, what would happen sometimes?
I missed the ball.
Like, it's not your thing. What are the sports you play?
Baseball and basketball.
Yeah. So soccer's never really been your thing,
Yeah.
right?
No.
And so what would Enoch do almost every day with you? Would he coach you?
Yeah.
And he'd encourage you. And what did he do? They let Eli play in the game.
When Maama Victoria said he can't play.
That's right. They still let him play in the game. The big game against the other kids. And what did Enoch do the whole time that you were playing?
He stayed behind the goal because I was goalie, and he was just coaching me a lot, and he got a yellow card.
Because you're not supposed to do that. And he got a yellow card from the ref. Yeah. And on the last day, he had found out that it was your birthday, right? You want to? I'll get it for you. You tell.
So it wasn't really my birthday, but it was close to my birthday, and he was just very kind. So he gave me this thing, and I told him no because it's like the only thing he had. And it's this little glass thing that says "Happy Birthday." May your birthday shine brightly like your smile. May you live like a fine wine. You're getting better with age. Happy birthday. And I told him no because it's like the only thing he had, and he just told me yes and yes and yes.
Do you remember where Enoch's from? I can help you.
Yeah. He's from Rwanda, and he came to Uganda because it was safer. And Maama Victoria let him sleep on the floor of a classroom.
Because they had no place to live. That's right. And he was just constantly kind and helping Eli the whole time he was there. Do you want to say anything else, Ange?
How often do you think of Enoch?
Oh, every day.
So here you have a boy who, Rwandan refugee fleeing violence, who then scooped up him and was constantly kind to him and gave him the only thing he had. So you heard a little bit about playing games. We played a lot of frisbee, a lot of soccer, a lot of other games. Last night they made us a feast. It was a pretty good feast. It was a pretty good feast compared to the constant matoke. It was good. Yeah?
It did have matoke in it.
Well, yeah. That's like manna from
What's
above.
life without matoke?
Exactly. And here we are getting ready to leave. The last day, saying goodbye. And what you see in the back is that's the van that we're going to take to go around, to go on our safari. Do you have anything else you guys want to say? Steve? All right. Because that's where we went next, and we're not going to show you any other pictures of animals. So we figured if you had questions, we could answer questions, but we kind of end there about the presentation. Heather.
I noticed that a lot of the kids have very, very short haircuts. Is there a reason behind that?
Lice. They have to shave their head because, number one, they don't have hairbrushes, and they have to shave it because they're like living in the same room as like sometimes 30 other kids, and because of how close they are, lice can spread really quickly, so it's just safer if they keep their heads
Yeah.
shaved.
It really is, it's a preventative step, and you see that at almost all the boarding schools is what I was noticing, because all of that football match, it was all against boarding schools. Every school had that, and one of the boarding schools, all the kids had white powder in their hairs too, which you could tell something is like broken out, which is why they all had the white powder.
And we experienced trying to take showers in the amount of water that they had coming out of their shower, which
It
was
was fine.
good,
It was
very
fine.
good compared to most other places. So I thought about, the amount of water that it would take for kids to be able to regularly wash their hair.
150
And
kids.
they just don't have enough water to be able to
And
wash
we
their
were
hair.
using the paid-for water.
Mhm.
So like that again was like opulence. That was them paying with money they didn't have to make us comfortable.
They just bent over backwards to try to make us as comfortable as possible. They gave us everything they had and more to try to be hospitable for us.
I think that shower was better than the one that we had when we went to Queen Elizabeth, because that one started like pouring out rust.
Well, it did pour out rust, yeah.
So how did the kids feel about both of your hair?
Yeah, they
It
had
was miserable.
basically no experience with white people. And so they were just fascinated by my hair and Lucy's hair. They just were so interested in it. They wanted to touch it and stroke it and braid it. So I think there was a picture earlier. Sometimes we would have 10 kids all
More.
gathered around us.
I had 20 one time.
They liked my arm hair.
They were fascinated by that too.
Amos was like,
Oh, I almost tried to yank my arm hair off.
he successfully hit your arm.
I have a question about the teachers.
Yes,
Are they coming right from the community? Do they go to school? How do they?
it's a great question. So there is a full university system that exists in Uganda. So you go to primary school, you go to secondary school, then you go to university. They are university trained.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they have.
I wouldn't say that's necessarily true in the nursery school. I don't know about that, but I know that the teacher, like who was teaching David, the boy who was kind of standing like that, I was speaking to him. I know where he went to university. It was out at Fort Portal. So they have university training.
So because
I don't think they get a lot of training about pedagogy and how to teach. They get a lot of training of learning content knowledge, so they know a lot about science and history and all that.
Is it like here in the United States, we don't have the teachers like we used to? So are they having trouble getting the teachers? Because they get paid?
No. I mean, the trouble there is just massive poverty.
So,
I mean, because you take a job and you still don't have enough money to
Right.
live.
so who's coming to teach? Are there the people that live there as a child and they want to come back to their community? Or
So my experience in talking to the teachers there is I only met one teacher who was from nearby.
Okay.
All the other teachers were from different communities.
So they're coming.
Some as far, one was near Queen Elizabeth, one was out near Murchison Falls, another which that doesn't mean much to you other than to say
Okay.
hours away that they had traveled to Mityana. Again, because Mityana is stable,
Right.
Mityana doesn't have some of the more violent
Yeah.
realities near the border.
Right, right.
It's a safe place to be. You also get some housing from Maama Victoria. That clinic out near the girls' hoopball court, where the kids were working in that little farm thing that you saw in the picture, that's housing for 4 teachers. I got to go inside it in the middle of a huge downpour of rain, and I'll tell you, there's not a teacher in the States who would take it, because it's just a one-room thing with 4 beds. But it's free housing. It's smaller than this room, there are 4 beds, there's no electricity, and that's what you get for your housing.
What is the chances that any of the kids who go to this school could go to school and become a teacher?
Oh, good. I mean, what was that? Was it Irene? Was that the name of the girl who was helping us?
Yeah.
Irene is studying to be a nurse. She went through that school, she's in secondary, and she's studying for university. And I'll tell you, we saw like some of the workbooks, like they're just like empty plain books, notebooks. And we picked up one and looked at like the advanced geometry and work that was in some of those. Like, once you get to secondary school, you are not messing around. Like, it's real academics.
I
Yes.
barely understood anything in that book.
So I'm interested in the healthcare. Is there a doctor or nurse that visits
That's a great
this
question.
area? And
It's a great question.
are the kids able to get vaccinated?
It's such a good question.
And where do they go when they're sick?
So Mityana is actually a town of about 110,000 people. It's bigger than Portland, but you wouldn't know. Because it's a market town made up of villages. And so in Mityana, we drove past the hospital. Do you remember driving past the hospital? You remember driving past the hospital. And it's run by the government. And so the answer is, once you get really sick, let's say you get malaria, which happens. It's not irregular, it happens. Once you get really sick, right now, Maama Victoria will take you to the hospital and you get treatment at the hospital.
So they don't get preventative care? They don't get
Nope.
vaccinated for malaria?
Well, there is no vaccine for malaria that I'm aware
Yeah.
of. We had to
Okay.
take pills the
Oh,
whole time we were there.
prophylaxis, yeah.
And nobody takes prophylaxis.
Yeah.
When we were flying
Yeah.
Emirates, and we said we need some water to take our malaria meds, the Emirates person was like, "What are you taking that for? Did you get sick?" We're like, "No, in the US they give it to us when we travel." She's like, "That's crazy, I've never heard of that. Nobody does that unless you get sick."
That's weird.
You know, which is true. A lot of other countries would never take the pills we take for malaria unless you get sick.
Yeah.
Because
COVID?
But no, there's definitely
No,
no
no.
vaccines or anything like
Maama
that.
Victoria would love, and she talked, I don't know if she talked to you about this, she wants to hire a nurse, a school nurse. Because right now, what happens is, unless you get really sick, no medical care. Once you get really sick, they fire up Steven's truck and drive you 12 minutes to the hospital, which is sitting right there, and you'll get medical care. I'm not going to vouch for what kind of medical care, but you will get medical care, right? And then that's that. She wants to get a nurse. The nurse will cost $300 a month. Which by our standards, that's cheap. That's nothing. Can you imagine $300 a month for a nurse, Edith?
I thought you mentioned a clinic. You said there was a clinic next.
So she bought a building and was going to run it as a clinic and quickly realized there's no way she had the financial support to run it, and then turned it into, and so this building had been a government clinic. The government didn't fund it. It shut down. And she said, well, this is my chance to get a little more land. We can farm a little more. The girls will have a good place to have sports, because she's really investing in sports for the kids. And then also to have some housing, since it's not being run as a clinic.
So there's no kind of infirmary or anything?
No,
Wow.
no. I mean, you saw what there is.
Do they brush their teeth?
No.
I couldn't answer that question. I did not see rotting teeth.
Yeah, but I can't imagine they have money for that.
They don't have toothbrushes. There's no chance they have toothbrushes.
Actually, in fact, we thought about bringing toothbrushes.
Yeah.
We'd spoken to dentists, but kind
The
of,
toothpaste would run out.
what are you gonna do when that runs out?
Yeah.
You know, it's a short-term, feel-good solution,
Yeah.
which, you know, it's nice to say, here, let me make your life better.
Yeah.
Feels good to me, but in the long term, it doesn't
Yeah.
work.
No, it doesn't.
They use a stick.
That is often exactly what they do, is they use a stick,
Yep.
which pulls the plaque off. It's what people have done for thousands of years.
And I know this because of history of the toothbrush.
That's right, which you guys listen to.
So what's the longevity of these people?
I can't answer that question because I
There's
don't know.
one fact we learned that
I just don't.
1 out of 10 children die.
Yeah. By what age?
I don't remember.
Is that the infant mortality rate? That's the infant mortality rate. 1 out of 10.
No, it's not just infant, it's not just
I
infant.
think that was
I think it was-
It was up to 5. It
Yeah.
was like
I
children.
think by the time they're 13, 1 in 10
Did you see older people there at all?
Oh, yeah.
And how were they treated? I mean, they just,
Oh, they're taken care of by the community in a way that makes this country look despicable.
really? They all work together.
Elizabeth wants to share something, but I also know Steve could share. Ugandans hold this country in contempt for the way that we treat our elderly.
I just wanted to share in my 2016 experience, and it's just touching my heart to see all this happening now. We were there a couple of days, and there was a little boy and little girl, 4 years old twins, that were dropped off. And we'd heard that this is what happens, but we actually saw it. And they had their pajamas on. They were like, not knowing exactly what happened, you know, that kind of look in their face. And the next day, they didn't have pajamas on because the kids had given them clothes, of their clothes. And they go and they sleep with, what happens in those bunk beds is an older child, you know, sleeps with you. So they scooped them in to their bed and gave them the love. And after about four days, they were fully as part of the whole community, and they were smiling and they were laughing, and we just saw that term Ubuntu happening in that kind of environment. So that's what we wanted to support, you know, so that more and more kids could come there, more and more kids could get that love. And of course food and clothes and all that, but that embrace of love that happens. Very unselfish and very filled with Christ. Just so happy to see this happening.
Other questions? Yeah, you.
I did not notice one single dog.
There is one dog,
That dog is scary.
and that dog is a mean dog. That's not really fair. His name is Max, and Max is both
scary
a
dog.
pet and a guard dog. He serves two purposes. And really what that means, I mean, he's there for a purpose, which is partially to keep the people in the school safe. So you got to be careful, because if Max thinks you're not supposed to be there, Max will growl and bark and come at you.
And that happened to me.
And you know, dogs have a different purpose. They're not snuggly, wonderful little pets. You know, it's different. You know, dogs are often street animals there. You know, Max lives outside. Max is not an indoor animal.
But when we went to this restaurant with Maama Victoria and Stephen, they wanted to do this, you know, for us. They went to this restaurant that I'm sure is like way beyond what almost anybody there can afford. They took us to this fancy restaurant. And at the end of the meal, they asked for a doggy bag. And so they took home the bones
Of all the leftover fish.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
chicken.
for the dog.
So that becomes a diet.
Yeah.
But it's also
Max is
like
very
you would
happy.
think of, oh, like my dog would like this. Well, they were thinking exactly the same way about Max. And they were right. Max was going to like that fish skin and all that kind of stuff, because what dog doesn't like that, right?
The other thing she said was, I'm not sure if Max is a pet or a guard dog. And
He's not very good at being
it
a guard
took a
dog.
lot not to laugh in that moment.
Because they were asking us, you know, we were talking about that we were going to be getting a new puppy, and so we were sharing that with them. And, you know, they were asking a lot of questions about what it's like to have a dog here, and it's just very, very different. You know, so they live inside your house.
Really?
Eli, you have a lot of words about this dog.
Worst dog ever.
Yeah, Eli was not a fan of Max.
You and the dog didn't get along,
Eli? But any
Eli,
other
Dr.
questions? Susan. Any other questions?
Do they have chickens?
Yes.
They do have chickens, yeah. This school has a number of animals at it. It had chickens, not a ton.
And
We
3
would,
cows.
we would watch them be carried, and then we would have chicken for dinner. So you would know that you were having chicken.
But no eggs, kind of a thing?
That's how we got eggs sometimes too, was from the chickens. They had 3 cows, they had goats. They used to have pigs, but the pig enclosure was totally empty, so we're not sure what had happened there. They had, they grew all kinds of plantains. They had mango, they had avocado, they grew coffee, but nobody there drinks coffee. The coffee is entirely for sale for export. Entirely. They grow cassava. Can you remember what else? Potato,
Bananas.
banana.
Mango, they had a big mango
Yeah,
tree.
the big mango tree.
Avocados.
I think that's about, corn,
Maize.
yes, corn. And I never knew termites will attack corn and just decimate the corn crop.
Really?
It'll go after the corn stems, and it was happening right behind the teacher's house. Yes, Heather.
So I would just, out of curiosity, does Maama Victoria's go to the market to sell anything? Or they're only able to really produce what they can use?
What they produce helps offset their usage. As she explained to me, what they produce is about 10% of what they use. She doesn't have that much left.
What about the coffee? They don't drink coffee.
Nobody drinks coffee.
So what does she do with the coffee?
You
for?
sell it to make some
Oh, she
cash.
makes on it.
Yeah. And you'll see it as you drive throughout the countryside, you'll see them drying it and then selling it.
There was a big tea plantation after we went chimp tracking, and you could tell that they cut down
All the chimp
so
forest.
much of the chimps' habitat to
Yep.
grow tea, and it was really hard to see that because like we had just gotten out from seeing all these chimps, and like suddenly you just walk into this enormous tea plantation.
They're pretty.
It was really pretty, but it was really hard to see. Like one side there's this like habitat for chimps, and then there's just a tea plantation on the side of the road.
Yeah, on the side of the road.
What happens when the kids come to the end of their school year?
They can test and go to secondary school, or if you're female, you're probably going to get married.
Well,
Okay.
and you only get to go to secondary school
If
if
you
you have
test
money.
them.
So Maama Victoria will take any child, you don't have to have money to go to school there. But if you want to go to secondary school, you have to have money to pay for it. And so you have to pass a test to get into the school, but you also have to be able to pay for it. So it's a small percentage of the kids who go to school there who are able to move on to secondary school.
13%.
Oh, is that
They're
right?
not to secondary school.
If girls don't get married, are there jobs like hairdressers, you know, those entry-level jobs?
There's not a lot of
Or they're
entry-level
There's
jobs.
nothing.
Not a lot of entry-level jobs. It's a deeply poor country.
If you don't go to secondary school, you're gonna get married. And that's it.
What happens to the children that don't have the money to go on to secondary
They're going to work farming.
school? Where will they live though, if they've been boarding with Maama Victoria?
It's a good
If they get
question.
married, then they'll live with whoever they're married.
So I'll use the example of Enoch's family. Okay? Enoch's family is from Rwanda. They came as refugees. Unlike here in the United States, refugees can immediately start working. There's no bizarre waiting period. Just gonna say that, right? Yep. And so she let them sleep on the floor, get their feet on the ground, and then what they did is they started finding ways to work in the farms. They would work as day laborers, right? They'd get enough money, then they would rent farmland, and they would start farming, and they would start selling what they had. So, Lynn, that's a lot of the answer to your question, is you live as a subsistence farmer. And that is a lot of the economy there. One of the things that we did after this is we went to a national park where they have the salt lake where they make salt. And it's scorching hot, stinks of sulfur because it's actually a volcanic lake. You can ask Steve what it feels like, he fell in it. That's a different story for a different time. And these people work 12 to 14 hours a day to make 10 kilograms of salt. And that 10 kilograms of salt sells for $10. And the right to make that 10 kilograms of salt is passed down for hundreds of years, because that is a good job. $10 a day of backbreaking labor is much better than working as a day laborer raising food. So, I mean, that's the answer to your question, I think. It's going to be a crummy life, which is part of the reason that it's brutal to hear, like kids say, if you don't know how to say something in English, keep your mouth shut, because it's a big deal to talk in Uganda. You don't talk in Uganda. Learn. Learn, learn, learn. Get educated, because that's your chance. Because otherwise, it's rough.
I just looked it up, 17% of youth beyond age 13 are able to go to school in Uganda.
Wow.
17% continue on beyond age 13.
And we know, for instance, that like Maama Victoria does find ways to give financial support, like to Irene. She is supporting Irene, who doesn't have money, and yet she's still going to secondary school.
Peter, you probably mentioned earlier, who colonized Uganda?
The Brits.
I think there is their land, not everybody, the land is not owned by somebody. And so if you find a space, you could just kind of...
So here's the story. Some of the land is owned by the federal government. Museveni, the longest serving president in all of Africa, also known as a dictator. Some of the land is owned by the kings of Uganda. Yes, there are still kings in Uganda, multiple kings of Uganda, of the different kingdoms, and then the rest is still privately held by individuals. If it's owned by the kings, you rent from the kings. If it's owned by the feds, you rent from the feds. If it's privately held, you buy it. There is no public, totally open land.
Is there a worship life at the school?
Yeah, you saw it. You saw that, right? An hour every evening of just praise. And then Sunday mornings, I helped lead a Sunday morning worship service that they do. I was nervous about doing that because the Episcopal Church and the Church of Uganda are not exactly friendly with each other. But Maama Victoria she runs her own place. And she said, no, you do it. I don't care, you do it. So we did that. We didn't do communion because you don't take communion until you've been confirmed, and in Uganda, until you're married.
Really?
So if you don't get married, you don't get confirmed?
Correct. Because keep in mind, this is one of the most homophobic countries on the face of the earth. And that's a different story for a different day about some men looking for asylum here in the U.S. and that me and the bishop are looking to see what we can do to help get them out of Uganda because they're being persecuted because of their sexuality.
So there's one other thing in terms of their worship life. There is a Catholic parish or sub-parish within walking distance, maybe a 20-30 minute walk from there. So when I was there before, I walked over with some of the older kids. I'm not sure what the cutoff is where you can go to the actual church service and mass, but maybe the top 15%, oldest 15% will do that.
And then they do catechism. The catechist will come in and catechize some of the kids. But again, you're still no communion's happening.
And that's part of the outreach of the Catholic Church there?
She's Anglican.
She's Anglican. She's Anglican, okay.
Yeah. And her son is an Episcopal deacon, and her husband is part of the cathedral, which you can see across the valley.
Okay.
So they go to the cathedral.
The cathedral.
Maama Victoria and her husband are involved in the cathedral there. But there is a weekly chapel service for the kids at the school because they, of course, don't have any transportation to be going to a church.
And one of the things I didn't realize is Uganda is still about 20% Muslim and 80% Christian. And so some of the kids at the school are Muslim. That's another reality.
Just another side note here in terms of worship. When we were there before, we went to several different church services because we were there for quite a while. And probably more than half the time, I would be sitting there in Sunday worship and just, they would say, oh, and our sermon this morning is from our guest from the United States.
Wow, congratulations.
Somebody told me that was gonna happen, so you get up and preach.
You get up and preach.
About
Let the Holy Spirit take you.
Well, I had heard this could happen, so I had a little bit of a plan.
But so you go from the Bible, you just go by an experience of your life, or?
It was 7 years ago. I'm an old man. I could barely remember. I just don't remember. One time they told me ahead of time it was going to happen this Sunday, so I actually did prepare a sermon. But most of the time it was just.
Get up and testimony.
You just go with
I
it.
use that same sermon multiple times, like in different places.
They have so much respect for people from the United States. You know, we were very honored and kind of put up on a pedestal. They really did everything they could to try to show us respect and hospitality, and often in ways that were uncomfortable to us because we didn't want to be in a hierarchy type thing where, you know, just being aware of the history of colonialism and racism in general. You know, it was hard to experience the level of sort of their service to us because they really wanted to do anything they possibly could to try to be respectful and to try to make us comfortable and to take care of us.
Well, we are definitely over time, so I want to let you all go. If you're interested in finding out more about Support Lucy has papers, which tell you a little bit about that. We appreciate you coming. Steve wants to